People. Hello, people.
Hello, people.
My name is Waylon Lewis of Elephant Journal, and I'm honored to be here with Steven Ablondi. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Waylon.
So we're here in Boulder, Colorado. What are you doing in Boulder? Because you're not normally here.
I spend most of my time in South Africa.
Yeah.
I spend a few months each year in America.
Yeah.
House on Lake Champlain in Vermont. But my work often brings me to Boulder. I come out 3 or 4 times a summer to visit with Brian Bowen, our architect for the project we're doing in South Africa.
Brian Bowen is a longtime friend, incredibly good-looking guy, modest, handsome. We love him. He's been a great. You've been a great writer and whatever with Elephant for many years. We did a video with him many years ago. Mm-hmm. So we just met yesterday for coffee.
True.
What all did we talk about? What do you do, and why are you so inspiring to me?
Well, we're working in a small town in South Africa, basically trying to rebuild it after the shocks that it received during the Apartheid government that they had. Everybody knows about that.
So Apartheid was the government that oppressed Africans for how long did that go on?
You know, it wasn't as long as most people would think. It started in the late 1940s, and it ended officially in 1994 when Nelson Mandela was elected president. Right. But the repercussions of it last to today.
I'm sure.
Just
like here in the U.S., obviously very different, but the ripples continue.
They changed the laws, but they weren't really able to change the way the people were living.
So you don't sound South African. How did you come to be there?
We were actually posted there by the UN.
Oh.
And just treated it as a place where we had to go and do our job, like many other.
Right.
We worked in a dozen countries around the world, almost all of them in war zones, and we worked in refugee camps and in crisis situations, and living amongst people that had to flee where they were born and leave their lives behind.
Right.
Living in a confined environment off of other people's food and stuff like that. It actually, in a funny way, prepared us to deal with the people in South Africa who that had been done to them by their own government.
For decades.
For decades.
Oh.
Generations.
So right now I have a couple of friends who are great crafts people working on my house, and I'm thinking about, like, I need a storm door and I need to paint my door white or caulk it or whatever. And these people have lost their homes. They don't have food supply. They don't have jobs necessarily because they're, they have to travel to be safe or whatever. What an intense way of life. It's almost hard to imagine.
And in the refugee camp situation, the first ones that we visited were in Southeast Asia. We worked in Thailand and Cambodia.
And what age were you doing all this from?
I was a little over 30
when you started.
I started working in the refugee camps. Cindy was a couple years older.
Your wife, Cindy?
Yep. And Cindy had a little bit more experience overseas.
Okay.
And I'd like to come back to that later.
Yeah.
But
it's your show.
I was a little over 30. I went into this refugee camp of 190,000 people for the first time. And the odd thing was, when I tell people, is I found it a more uplifting experience than people would guess. To see people who had been stripped of their homes, been stripped of everything that they had, and they were living in these small huts, but they had constructed the huts. They were sweeping the dirt in front of them every morning.
Wow.
They were living with dignity.
Wow.
There were a certain few of them who were thriving. One of the people has come to be my friend. Started a human rights organization in the refugee camp. He became a nurse. He learned how to speak Chinese. So, although most of them languished pretty poorly, a few of them just rose to the pinnacle of what you could imagine.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, working with refugees over the years, and then, so what's the story you want to? There's a lot of stories you have.
There's a lot of stories.
This could be story time.
This could be story time.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to start with a couple other people.
Okay.
And I think it might be of interest to your viewers because I'm going to focus on the positive effect of changing the world that a couple ladies have had. One of them being Cindy, my wife. And I want to tell the story about when she was young and how she embarked on her path to changing the world. And then I want to weave in the story of a 70-year-old woman who came to visit us and provided some service in South Africa and started to change that society and also began to change the world.
Yes.
So it starts maybe with the Khmer Rouge. It might start with this little yellow Volkswagen Bug. So we're in the mid-70s.
Yeah.
In America, just coming out of the Vietnam War, times are tough in America. People are pretty depressed. People are not happy.
The economy's crazy. The Vietnam War was devastating to the national morale.
So a young woman in her early 20s comes back from 3 years with the Peace Corps in Africa to America, and this is the woman that I'm going to meet eventually and marry. We've been together for the past 30 years.
Congratulations.
So, thank you. Yeah. So Cindy Burns comes back from Africa knowing that she wants a career in the international world. And she goes to a school in Brattleboro, Vermont called the Experiment in International Living. They have a school for international training, and she begins to get a graduate degree there.
This is 1975.
This is in the years just following 1975.
Okay.
So, while she's at the school, she's young, she's a little crazy. I told you the mood of the country was bad. Right. There's hormones, there's adrenaline, and she's got this little yellow Volkswagen that she drives all over campus. And there's a little parking sign that says "Park here" as she drives her Volkswagen across the campus grass and pulls up in front of the education buildings and goes to the class. And 35, 40 years later, I'd meet people, and we'd be in a crowd, and they'd say, "Do any of you remember Cindy? She was at SIT." And they go, "Was she the girl who was driving the Volkswagen across the grass?" And then she became known for it, and she loved it. That was kind of who she was. That was her symbol of who she was, the Volkswagen. So while she's there, the experiment enters into an agreement with the American State Department.
The school called the Experiment enters into an agreement with the State Department.
That's right. So the State Department is cognizant of the fact that our war in Vietnam disrupted lives all over the region. Sometimes American pilots were shot down and local people took care of them. And then after the communist governments took over in Laos and Cambodia and Vietnam, these people stood to be persecuted terribly. So the American government, I think, much to their credit, offered to resettle these at-risk people to America. And they began a program of training them before they came to the States.
So let me interject. Callie is the editor on duty. She probably has said this and is sharing this to a bunch of pages, but if you have a question, please ask your question and we'll address them if you can stick around.
Okay. So they form a consortium of world education.
The State Department does?
Yes, because they don't do anything themselves. They fund things. So they form this consortium of world education, the Experiment in International Living, and Save the Children. And these people are tasked with running this massive program to educate and then transfer these at-risk people over to the United States of America. And these are Hill Tribe people. And most of them are pre-literate. They didn't even have an alphabet. So they needed some...
Pre-literate, like not even meaning illiterate. They didn't have a language.
They had a language, but they didn't have an alphabet. They didn't write. So Cindy learns about this while she's at the Experiment in International Living, and she keeps asking over and over and over again, can she go? Can she go? Can she go? She applies, and she keeps getting turned down.
Sorry, can she go to that region?
Yeah, that's right. She wanted to work.
Even though they're emigrating as people in some cases, right? What are you saying?
The State Department and the consortium are working in the refugee camps in Southeast Asia to prepare the people to come to America.
Okay.
So Cindy wants to use her training internationally to go over there and help out in this effort.
Wow.
But they don't hire her. And this is kind of the beginning of the story. This is why I think it might be interesting to your viewers, because she always talks about how you have to take a risk. Nothing gets handed to you. Even if you want to do good, nothing gets handed to you. So Cindy Burns sells her little yellow Volkswagen Bug that she loved more than anything else in the world, buys a one-way airplane ticket to Thailand, shows up at this refugee camp and goes to the office of the consortium tells them that she wants to work, and they hire her immediately as a teacher.
And did she speak? Whatever.
Not then.
Yeah.
She does now.
Yeah.
Within a week, they make her a manager of the 12 or 15 teachers that they had. And within about another week, they make her the coordinator of the program.
And was she nervous? Like she thought she might get rejected, or was she just fearless and just went for it, or both?
Yeah.
Both. Yeah.
Both, exactly.
I mean, it's a nice story when you hear the story, but to think, like, I'm going to do a one-way ticket, sell my thing, go to some table where I could get rejected or accepted by some random person. You don't even know if they're the decision maker.
That's right. So she's over there. She's working for them. She's got a position of responsibility. And it's still a rather small program for these people that I mentioned, these people that had assisted the American government.
Mm.
And all of a sudden, Cambodia ruptures. The Khmer Rouge, which had been running the country for 4 years, they have a military squabble with Vietnam. Vietnam invades, and suddenly they don't have control of the country anymore. And all the people who have been living in these forced labor camps run. It's the first time they're not under the yoke of the Khmer Rouge.
And the Khmer Rouge, for those who don't know, are synonymous with just mass bloodshed and just awful regime.
Yeah. Terrible, terrible. You know, 1 million, 2 million people killed in a 4-year period, and the people that live confined to forced labor camps.
Wow.
I'd love to have a conversation with you about them sometime.
And it was an ethnic thing?
No, not an ethnic thing.
No,
that's what makes it. You can't even call it a genocide, because a genocide is when you try and wipe out another ethnic group. It's just themselves. But I have to skip over that today.
Yeah.
So suddenly, this comparatively small program has hundreds of thousands of Khmer people, maybe 1 million, 2 million people, fleeing across the border into Thailand to get out of the reach of the Khmer Rouge.
And you were saying how many staff were there?
12 or 15, and that goes up to 800. So Cindy administers 800 staff.
Wow, thank whomever that she went.
Yeah, learns all of their names.
Wow.
She meets a woman over there, a Thai woman named An, who Brian Bowen and his wife come to meet, and who has come out here to Boulder, Colorado. Okay. So she gets she builds a name for herself as someone who's capable of administrating a strong program and stuff like that. And she decides that she wants to come back to America to go to law school so that she can hopefully get a job with the UN and continue this career. That's where I meet her. We meet in Vermont Law School together. Mm. So I've had a completely different career track.
Right.
I was investment broker of real estate. I was selling shopping centers and apartment complexes and going to law school. And within a pretty short period of time...
And you were a couple years younger. So you were still in whatever level of school.
Yeah, late 20s, graduate school, through college and law school.
Yeah.
So Cindy and I go and work for the UN.
So your life was pretty kind of stable and, predictable on some level until you met her. Right? Yeah. That was a big, I
was kind of off the wall because I was going full-time to law school and working full-time at a job 3 hours away. The teachers didn't know I was doing that, and my bosses didn't know I was going to school. But that's kind of a different story.
Right. But you were selling malls and a lawyer in Vermont, and you went from that to
refugee camps
in UN.
Yeah. So we work in war zones. I've seen my wife shot at. We've each been detained by the Khmer Rouge. I've been surrounded by an angry mob of them. She's been detained for 3 weeks.
And you're very tall, so it feels it's easy to surround because everyone can see you from even if you're
you're not so tall. Yeah. So Cindy was detained for 3 weeks by the Bosnian Serb rebel army in Sarajevo.
What does detain mean?
Imprisoned in her house. We've been hijacked. Cindy's office in Baghdad was blown up, and one of the top people in the entire United Nations, our hero, Sergio Vieira de Mello, was killed there. He was going to become Secretary General of the United Nations. And we had a live patch into our phone. Cindy was away on holiday when that happened. We were driving away from JFK, and we have an open line to the UN High Commissioner's Chief of Staff, with an open line to Baghdad, and we listened for 2 or 3 hours until our batteries started to wear out, And Sergio was trapped in the rubble, and
Oh,
people were giving him little sips of water.
I
to
see.
ask
It
him
was
to
live
come
patch while he was still alive
Yeah.
and under fire or
Yeah.
duress.
And he basically passed away within our earshot.
Wow.
So we had a wonderful and difficult career. And I say that only to explain why we retired a little bit early, and maybe 10 years earlier than most people would retire.
Right.
And we went to South Africa and to Vermont to live a good life of growing organic vegetables and living in places that had a lot of water and
Right.
put the war zones behind us.
You'd earned it.
I think so.
You're going out to
Thank you.
pasture.
We're going out to pasture.
Yeah.
And within about 3 weeks, Cindy forms She Wins, Sports Helping Empower Women in South Africa, and begins building the local community.
So She Wins. So hopefully
She
we can
Wins.
get that. Is there a link? SheWins.something?
It's on the Memel.Global
Okay.
website.
So we have that website hopefully in the comments somewhere. It's in the title as well.
Memel.Global.
Yeah.
She Wins is a tab on
So She Wins.
She
Okay.
Wins.
And what is She Wins?
We bring over young women who just graduated from American universities and give them an opportunity to mentor the young girls in Black Township next to me.
How is that safe?
It's totally safe.
It is.
In urban areas in Africa, things are dicey, maybe in some rural areas, but in our particular place, it's completely safe.
Right.
Brian Bowen has gone there for a month with his wife and his 2 sons.
And you felt very safe?
I let my 10-year-old, who was 5 or 6 at the time, go to the townships by himself with his buddies and
Wow.
cruise around. It was very safe and great.
Okay.
And my other buddy, Thomas Henninger, who lives in Maine, he had similar motivation to Brian, that we live in a completely white town and we're really progressive people and we want our kids to grow up with some diversity.
Right. Some experience of the world outside of whatever bubble.
Thomas just brought his 13-year-old son over to Memel, stayed with him for 2 days, deposited with us for 3 months, and we sent him to a term of school in a school that was 100% black except for his son Nate.
Yeah.
And 3 months later, his mom came back and picked him up and brought him back home, and they say it was one of the single greatest experiences of his life.
Wow. Great.
Okay, so here we are. We got She Wins. Things are happening, and back into our life pops on the Thai woman that Cindy had met 30 years previously over in Southeast Asia. She's now married to an American. And she says she wants to come to South Africa and participate in She Wins, and takes the first trip that she'd ever taken in her life that did not involve her husband or her children. So her children grew up, graduated from college, and now she's on her own, so she comes over to South Africa for a month or so.
So what your idea with starting She Wins, or your wife's idea, is to do this nonprofit? Was it to be a full-time thing, or was it just meant to be like a side project to your retirement?
It's meant to be a side project, and it's meant to be 3 months out of the year. But it has grown exponentially. And we started it to help the little girls in the primary school, but we could as well have started it to help the young American volunteers who come. It changes their lives. It sends them home with focus, direction.
And it's only women volunteers. Is that right?
99% of the time.
So if you have a daughter in college, they can apply to do this residency, or
especially if they've graduated
through Memel.Global,
the
website.
So Ellen comes over to South Africa, has such a great time that the next year she wants to come back, and she brings her neighbor with her, this 70-year-old woman named Ann Reeder, that we'd never met. We never heard anything about her. She didn't know us, but Ann spoke highly of the experience. And Ann wanted to make a contribution.
So it's Ann and Ann.
Yep.
Nice.
And, a lot of people come over. Some of them it's just a holiday, but a lot of them want to do some service. They want to make a bit of an impact on the community if they can. And Ann had been a nurse, and her only thought process of how she might be able to help involved, some kind of medical work. So she returned to the doctors that she had worked for and recently retired from, told them that she was going to Africa, and they gave her their old, outdated diagnostic equipment. So she came over and worked through all the primary school kids. Brian, could you hand me that picture of Sipa? And The first time these children had their blood pressure taken, they had their eyes tested, they had their ears tested.
This is a SIPO?
This is SIPO.
SIPO.
And SIPO puzzled us. SIPO was the most motivated young child we'd ever met. He was a long jumper, champion long jumper. And when the afternoons faded into evening and it got dark, SIPO would keep running around the track because he wanted to be better than everybody else.
Wow.
And if it started raining in the afternoon, SIPO would stay in the long jump pit after everybody else had gone home. But he'd stayed back twice in school. And we're like, how can this guy be so motivated and so driven, and he can't do something as simple as getting through a couple grades of primary school? And because of Ann, we found out he couldn't hear the teachers. The teachers thought he was sitting in the back of the room, not paying attention, didn't care.
Wow.
But he had hearing loss, and he didn't know what the teachers were talking about.
Oh, wow.
So
and he had never... Did he know, or did he just not want to talk about it?
I honestly can't answer the question. It's
Yeah.
a great question, but
Yeah.
I don't know. And so we were able to explain to the teachers what was going on, and they were able to make a strategy of how to help us.
I got chills.
Well,
And that makes the whole... How old was he when that discovery was made?
11 or 12.
Yeah, I mean, that changes the whole arc of your life, right?
Yeah. So SIPO became the provincial long jump champion, the first provincial champion.
Provincial is like a big, the whole province.
I'd say 4 or 5 million people.
Wow.
Okay. Wow. And there had never been a provincial champion from that town, even when it was an all-white school during apartheid.
Mm.
And it was breaking our heart that this kid was going to be the provincial champion, and what's he going to do? He's going to grow up to be a hoodlum or something? He can't pass 2 grades of school?
Because he couldn't get a job.
Well, no one's going to hire somebody who can't graduate from primary school.
Yeah.
So now we've got him on track. Now he's getting help.
No pun intended.
And that's fantastic, by the way. So if you got chills from this,
Yeah.
wait for the rest of the story.
Okay.
And now,
That's
for the
SIPO.
rest of the story.
Please. You're in there.
Cindy's a networker, and she never gives up about anything. So she ends up in Pretoria and tells one of her doctor friends about this young capital of South Africa.
So is this starting to take up all of your time, kind of thing?
It takes up all of our time. We spend more time doing this than we did working for
So your retirement shot?
Our retirement is totally shot.
Yeah. And how many years has this been since you intended to retire?
10 years.
10 years. Okay.
10 years. We've spent our retirement money. We've developed the town. We are so happy. We are so fulfilled.
Well, you haven't even mentioned that. You developed a town. You're going to get to that.
We'll come back to that.
Yeah, okay.
So Cindy mentions to this doctor about this young boy with a hearing loss. And he tells her about a hearing aid manufacturer in America. Turns out it's the only one in America. And they've got a foundation, and they help people who need it and can't afford it, and they do trips overseas.
And what's this foundation? Or?
The name of the company is Starkey. It was started by this wonderful man named Bill Austin. And they have the Starkey Hearing Foundation, which is called So the World May Hear. And coincidentally, it's located...
Maybe we can put that link in the comments.
That would be great. They'd appreciate it. They're wonderful people. I'll speak more about them in a few minutes.
So the world may hear.
So the world may hear. Coincidentally, they're located in Minnesota. And Cindy has some family in Minnesota, and we go out there once a year. So Cindy embarks on a 4-year process where she bangs on their door every time we go out to Minnesota and says, would you guys consider coming out and helping this boy? Would you consider helping other people in the town? And they say, yes, we'll consider that. And they tell her what she has to do to prepare, and we spread the word. We ask if there's any other people who might need this. Turns out that about 5% of the normal population is hearing handicapped and needs help.
Of any population?
Of any population, on average.
5%?
And it's much higher in societies that have high prevalence of HIV/AIDS, the two-color community.
Or maybe not good childhood nutrition.
Or sleeping on a dirt floor.
Right.
Yeah. So they keep saying that they're going to come, and they don't come. And we learned that they're actually having a couple of problems internally. Some of their executives, they had to get rid of them. The family came back into the business and started running it again. And this turns out to be a blessing in disguise. Because Cindy doesn't give up. She keeps coming back. They get to know her. The family comes back, starts running the operation, and we now have an intimate relationship with them instead of a distant relationship.
Right. Instead of just being a piece of paper.
Yeah, or we talk to the executive director of our foundation, kind of like a bureaucrat or something like that. So it comes out in conversation that Cindy has this long career with the UN. At first, that's just kind of a curiosity to them, although they're very interested in it. They always thought that maybe they could do something with the UN. And we learn more about each other. We learn that Cindy's very organized, we can handle the things on the ground there, and we learn that they've always wanted to work in South Africa. So we share information.
So what's it, can I interject just on a personal level?
Yeah.
What's it like being married to someone who's just constantly doing all these huge things and super organized, and you're obviously have a ton of energy in yourself? Like, what is that relationship like? If I may. Sounds
crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It is the most satisfying thing in the world.
It sounds amazing.
I am so proud.
But not...
I married a woman who had the balls to sell her little yellow Volkswagen and buy a one-way trip to Thailand and start a fantastic career where she started to change the world.
It sounds like the funnest and maybe scariest and maybe even frustrating sometimes like roller coaster ever, as opposed to just like, I don't know, just a stable kind of consistent situation that can be hard. We all have challenges in our daily lives, but you have challenges in your daily life, I'm sure, but then on top of that, you're on some level taking on the world.
For 20 years when we worked with the UN, I don't think we ever lived in a place for more than 1 month. Oftentimes we'd remained in the country for 3 years, but we'd have to move to where the crises happened to be at the time.
Do you have children?
We don't have any children.
You don't have children. Okay.
25 nieces and nephews, but we don't have any children.
And was that, if I may, and you can just move on if you don't want to talk about it.
Was that
decision. Sort of a trade-off for that, what your service in your life?
It was not a trade-off. It was a conscious decision that we made beforehand, but in retrospect, we would not have been able to do what we did for the UN and help the UN change the world if we had had normal constraints, if we had been householders.
So it wasn't a loss. It wasn't a trade-off in that way. It was a conscious decision.
We weren't faced with the decision.
And you have countless, as you kind of said, family, but also like, being a father and mother of a town. Brian over here. Oh, you're listening to the video. There we are.
We can go nowhere.
This is great.
This is art imitating life, imitating art.
We're getting meta.
Okay. All right. So we can go nowhere in this town of 500 or 600 white people and 6,000 or 7,000 black people and not have people know who we are. Right. Can't do it.
And how do people treat you?
Almost all of them treat us wonderfully, and some of the white people are deeply suspicious that we try and help black people because they kind of haven't lost their kind of, these people really didn't have much going for them anyway, and we did the right thing by trying to be separate from that's no.
And is that old timers mostly?
Old timers,
not the new generation.
A few, but not an important number. Okay, so here we are. If I can remember where I was on the thread.
She was very organized.
Okay, so we're talking about
the world may hear. So the world may hear respected her.
Yep. And they knew about her background with the UN. And it turns out that Bill Austin was about to be honored by the UN for his humanitarian work around the world, giving out hearing aids to people.
Bill Austin is the
founder of Starkey. And so they invite us to come to New York City, to the UN headquarters, to be with them when their company receives this honor. And we learn more and more backstory all the time. It turns out that Bill Austin got friendly with Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton was aware of what he was doing and basically made a challenge to him. He said, Bill, could you do it to 10 times your impact?
Clinton said that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Bill's like, I don't know. And Bill says, how about if I have my Memel.Global initiative work with your team and we come up with a strategy that you give away more and more of these things? And Bill Austin said, yeah. And he made a pledge to Bill Clinton that by the year 2020, he would give away 1 million hearing aids.
And that's a lot.
That's a real
Is they're expensive, I assume?
They're expensive.
You have to install them.
And as I say, he makes them in America. He doesn't make them in China.
Nice. And you have to, I'm sure, like a doctor has to work with the patient. Like it's not just a product that you ship out.
Not only that, but to make this sustainable, everywhere they work with the community, they leave behind 1 or 2 trained employees who can help the people who get the hearing aids, and they give them a lifetime supply of batteries.
And how do they fund all this?
They fund it through the largesse of Bill Austin himself, who has a wonderfully profitable company making hearing aids.
Thank you, Bill Austin.
Yes, thank you, Bill Austin. And they have a gala every year to raise additional money.
Fun.
And they're blessed by having their customers, so to speak. The older you get, the more money you get, the more influential you are, the more likely you are to need hearing aids. So they've got Bill Clinton and George Bush and Jimmy Carter. When we go out to Minnesota and hear about their galas, the first time it was Katy Perry and George Bush. This past year it was Ben Affleck. So they raise a ton of money, and they use it wisely.
Wow. So
we're at the UN. We're talking about Cindy's career at the UN. And by now we've learned enough.
You have a photo of Cindy, right? Can we show that?
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Please. I got a photo of her with the headmaster at the Memel Primary School, who works with her every day on She Wins.
With, who is this?
This is Johan de Toit. He's the headmaster of Memel Primary School.
That's your, sorry, everything is mirrored. Johan, and that's your wife, Cindy.
That's right.
Okay. And I'll get a little closer for a moment. There she is. All right. Thank you, sir.
So it turns out that the biggest challenge that the Starkey Foundation faces is having groups of people to work with. You can imagine, you can't go into a city and kind of stand on the street corner and say, look, we're willing to help you.
How to make it
organized.
Yeah.
Organized. So if they're going to give away 1 million hearing aids, they need organization.
They need partners.
They need certainly partners, and they need structure. That's the word I'm really looking for. They need structure.
Okay.
So Cindy says to them, what about refugees? I've spent my entire life managing camps with hundreds of thousands of refugees. We register them, we give them ID cards so they can get food, shelter, healthcare, education. And if your statistics are right about the 5% background need, here are people that we can help you with in the structure. So not only
because they're actually in the refugee structure.
Yeah, they're being attended to by the UN. We know their names. We have a voluminous list of 50,000, 100,000, 200,000 names. We know who they are. So now, in the next 4 or 5 months, not only is Starkey coming to Memel to serve our community and help anyone who might need
the town.
Memel's our town in South Africa.
Yeah. Because
of Cindy's intervention and the introductions she made at UN headquarters, they are going to go to the largest refugee camp in Africa. And they are going to outfit those people with hearing aids.
Wow. That must feel good.
That feels really good.
Oh.
That feels really good. Now, step three, they are going, because they like the structure, because they like the administration, because they like Cindy's drive, because they like the competency of the people that Cindy introduced them to, they are going to treat each of these trips as a pilot project. And the 10 audiologists they bring from Johannesburg,
audiologists meaning hearing experts.
Yes, and the people they bring from America, it's two-pronged. They come once to actually check the people, measure them. They come back 2 or 3 months later, bring them the devices and fit them. So they're coming in November and February to Memel.
Wow.
So they're going to treat that now as a pilot project, and if that runs well, they're going to collaborate with the government of South Africa and methodically go through the entire country to help all the poor people that can't afford hearing aids in all of South Africa.
And how many people is that? That's tens of thousands, if not more?
More. I'd say more. Yeah.
Wow.
And they are going to treat the trip to the refugee camp as a pilot project. And if it works out, they're going to make a memorandum of understanding with the United Nations. And they are going to methodically visit every refugee camp in the world and help the hearing handicapped in every camp.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So, a couple things come to mind. One is, often in the military in the U.S., there's some kind of understandable attitude where they're like, we're different than civilians. We're serving actively. We're risking our lives. And there's some longing for civilians to know what that's like. I think it's similar in service and whatever it is that you do, what we would call that. People are doing work of great benefit and really engaging and not watching The Walking Dead on Netflix like myself at night. You know,
that's what we do late at night.
Okay,
when we're done.
good. I'm glad to hear that. But is there some longing or sense of frustration, or if there is, how do you work with it, that more people could get involved and know about it and feel that love and that inspiration and that gratitude of using whatever privilege we might have to help someone get a hearing aid or change their lives?
Well, when I met you very recently,
yesterday,
I told you that I think the world is actually changing in that direction, and more people are interested in it. And when we had our first conversation, you ended it by saying thank you for your service.
Right.
And I told you back in the 90s, even though we were wearing bulletproof vests and armored helmets and going to work in Cambodia and Bosnia, I never heard that from anybody.
Wow. So you feel like the global consciousness is changing around helping one another, empathy?
I absolutely do.
So you don't feel bitter and frustrated and worked to death? Like there's a huge thing in nonprofits, Peace Corps or whatever, where you get so inspired, but on the negative side, you burn out, right?
Yeah.
Don't a lot of your colleagues or
Yes.
people, burn out and feel frustrated that more people aren't helping?
I would admit that some of our colleagues burned out,
Right.
and we kind of called them dinosaurs, and the ones that hung on.
Yeah.
And we left 10 or 12 years earlier than we had to.
Right.
We were good at what we did, but just because we were good at what we did, does that mean that we had to do it for 30 years instead of 20 years? That was a choice on our part, and I think that's what gave us the energy when we left.
So taking care of yourself.
A reserve of strength to then begin an entire another career. And we think now that we're changing the world. And we feel that we're a little bit personally responsible for that. When we worked for the UN, we were helping people, we were changing the world, but if you really analyzed it, we were employees of the UN, we were helping the UN change the world.
You were helping.
We were helping.
Now you're driving.
Now we're driving it. If it wouldn't happen if it wasn't for us. And I'd like to explain that. That's why I told kind of a long story, because I don't want people, your viewers, I don't want them to think that people like Cindy and I are magic. That's why I talked to her about
That's
being
not
a young
helpful.
girl who was fearful and who didn't have
Who?
any money. My wife, she was young, she was fearful.
Cindy.
She didn't have any money. She sold her car.
Right.
She got, she took a risk.
Yeah, it's not helpful in a funny way if you put people who are doing good work up on a pedestal, because then conveniently it puts heroes up here, and then we can continue to watch The Walking Dead. Maybe all together, since it seems you watch it as well on Netflix. But, it almost is saying, oh, you're better and you're doing different stuff. But all of us,
we're not.
And I'm sure many of you, maybe you all can link your nonprofit you're helping out with in the comments. That would be inspiring to see. Give it a like or a love if you're inspired. That helps this video get beyond the Facebook algorithm, beyond the choir. If you're inspired, give it a funny face emoticon or like or love right now if you're inspired by this guy and all this work. And Cindy, and his children, anyone out there? Let's do some likes or love or hearts going. That'll help the algorithm blow up. It's pretty inspiring to see. I'm going to wait for a little moment. See if we got anyone who can do it. It's pretty quiet out there. 68 people. It's a big group. There's one. There's two. There could be a little delay. So
not to let you leave that.
Thank you, folks.
Cindy's a normal person. I'm a normal person. And Ann Reeder's a very normal person. She came to South Africa for a couple of weeks for the first time in her life. And she brought some diagnostic equipment. Yeah. And if it weren't for her, the deal would not have been made for South Africa. Ann, right?
And that wouldn't have led to the hearing.
And it wouldn't have led to the refugee camp stuff. Ann Reeder, a 70-year-old retired nurse from suburban Baltimore who happened to live next door to Ann, came to South Africa to volunteer with She Wins for a couple of weeks or a month, and she's just changed the lives of millions of people.
Wow. Is she still around or
absolutely,
active?
Absolutely. She's a great supporter.
And the cool thing, I always say this in half of every interview I've ever done, but Eleanor Roosevelt, one of our great first ladies, said she was miserable her whole life growing up. She had a kind of childhood where her family wasn't super pleasant in some ways, and she kind of hated herself and thought she was ugly and all this stuff. And then she discovered service and helping others, and she said, it was the first time I felt deep, real joy, and I never wanted to do anything other than that.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, and from the Buddhist point of view, and what you've said is you also have to take care of yourself, not just do service, but take care of yourself so that you can actually continue to do service, not out of martyrdom, but out of empathy and love and like health.
And with a bona fide appreciation that you're the one who's getting more than anybody else.
Wow, with that.
You know,
And you actually feel that?
Oh, I feel that. You know,
That's so inspiring.
I'll be honest. I'll be just really honest with you. You know, I was honest enough to tell you that I was selling shopping centers.
Right.
And even after all my work in refugee camps, you know, helping people directly all over the world, getting to know different groups of people. When we retired, you know, I thought I was going to go boating on Lake Champlain. I thought I was going to go to South Africa for a couple months ago, a year, and go watch the lions and the elephants and play some golf and go to the beach.
Yeah.
I wasn't looking for anything different than that. And this fell into our lap, and it has made my time in South Africa infinitely better than it would otherwise have done. And in the same way that we started She-Wins to help the little girls in the primary school, and it turns out that it helped the American volunteers just as much.
Oh, I'm sure.
The weird thing is that not only has this made my life great in South Africa, it's made my life great in America. Because now when I come home, I'm not just waiting as an interim time to go back to South Africa. I'm coming out to Boulder. I'm going out to the Bay Area in San Francisco.
You're meeting all these people who are doing good work.
I'm meeting Waylon Lewis.
Right.
And I get really charged up by that.
And do you and your wife and the organization have a continued relationship with all the collegiate volunteers?
Oh,
You
absolutely.
have this big extended family everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what college is it? People from random colleges or
Yes,
specific? Okay, so it's anywhere.
Yeah.
So these young women are all over the.
California, Indiana, Maine, Massachusetts, a lot of Vermont because we have a lot.
Is it all U.S.? Can people do it from?
We've had a
anywhere?
woman. We've had a woman from Paris.
Uh-huh.
We've had a couple younger women from London in the UK.
So, Europa? Yeah. So anyone at any college in any country can apply?
That's true.
Okay.
Anyone in any country can
So
apply.
tell your favorite young. Is it any college age? How is that?
We like them to be graduated.
Oh, so it's post-college.
Yeah, we like that. Exceptions can be made,
Sure.
but we make them rarely because there needs to be a level of maturity. Because even though I told you it's safe,
Right.
bringing these people to Africa,
It's a big thing.
they need to be able to show that they've been forced to take care of themselves
Right.
in college. If you
Right.
can get through college in one piece, you can
Sure.
navigate the whole thing.
Sure.
So, you know, we might talk about a few more things. That's
Please.
up to you. But
People want to hear more. I would love to hear a bit more. We're at 42 minutes. I got all the time in the world. And thank you, everyone. If probably very few of you have watched the full thing, but if you're even watching a minute or two, I'm very grateful. This is personally very deeply inspiring, and we've had 10,000 plus people watch so far in just this 42 minutes. So,
Well, thanks a lot, Waylon.
Yeah.
And if I can, I'd just like to conclude that segment by literally thanking my wife
Oh,
and
Well, that
for
comes
what
through.
she's done. And,
yeah, I want to meet her.
tell her that I love her from the bottom of my heart and I respect her. And thank you, Cindy, for changing the world.
Right.
And
Everyone out there is like heart right now. Yeah.
And shame on people like Donald Trump
Mm.
and his
Speaking of
climate
golf.
change denialists
Right.
who are making our world a worse place to live in. You know, Cindy and I and our supporters, we get to the end of each month and we juggle our checking accounts and our credit cards so that we can pay for having traveled around the world helping people.
Right.
And people of enormous wealth and influence and power are squandering their opportunities to do something
So
similar.
instead of building a golden toilet, literally a 14-karat gold toilet,
Or a golden wall to Mexico,
Right.
or changing our environmental laws so that young people are going to live in a hard world.
right.
These people should be helping to change the world, and I just want to say shame on them for not.
And the good news on the positive side of the shame is if and when those of us out there who maybe hear that, who are living more lives that are about ourselves, when, like at that Eleanor Roosevelt quote, when you engage in service, you actually find true happiness, and you don't even have to give up living a good life.
You give up nothing.
Right.
And I'll digress the way you digressed with Eleanor Roosevelt.
Yeah.
I read a fascinating thing about people of great wealth. And they have fears and worries, just like all the rest of us.
Sure.
And they actually fear that maybe their wealth is not going to be enough. Like for their children, for their grandchildren, who's next? Is this going to last? It doesn't make any difference if it's $50 million or $500 million or $1 billion. They actually have fears, and they say that the only way that you can chase those fears away is by directly volunteering with people and helping them.
Oh.
If you walk into a soup kitchen and you know that for $800 you can feed the homeless in your city a Thanksgiving meal, then it percolates into your head like, oh my God, I could do this morning, noon, and night for the rest of my life, and my fortune is still going to grow, and I can make a contribution to the world. And then they begin to relax for the first time. Yes, I have enough.
And how many wealthy people do we know who don't enjoy that wealth as much as they could? They're stingy. Like, I've known some people who are like, don't enjoy it. Like, you can see them not enjoying their lives. And my mom I grew up with my mom, single mom. She was super poor. $12,000 a year was her peak earning. And her Buddhist name that was given to her was Lotus of Generosity. And she was always, I would come home and she'd have given away something that I loved, like every week. And I was like, Mom! Because I was almost protective. I was like, I knew how poor she was, you know? And she was so happy. So still is. So,
if you want another story, I'll take Anna Lee.
All right. Story time. There we go. So who's this young lady?
Anna Lee, and that photo was a 10-year-old girl who just won the district championship in the long jump.
Okay.
Preceding SIPO. And she became one of the young South Africans of the year, noted by their most important newspaper. That's an honor that Trevor Noah had when he was growing up in South Africa.
Really?
Yep.
At what age?
I don't know his exact age, but probably as a teenager.
Wow.
Or something like that.
Trevor Noah won like one of the South African Kids of the Year?
Yeah.
Wow.
Most promising people for the future.
I guess they targeted well on that one.
And Annalile, I want to tell the story about her because of her selflessness. She turned out to be a great athlete. She went to the provincial championships as well. You get 3 jumps in the long jump, and you count your best one. And on one of her jumps, she jumped about this much farther than anyone else her age had ever jumped in South Africa. Wow. And she touched the line. It was like tiny, tiny, thin little line, and the jump didn't count.
Oh my God.
But her second best jump, which she had to make cautiously, not with reckless abandon, her second best jump allowed her to qualify to go to the national competition. So the headmaster, Johan, who you saw the picture of with Cindy, Johan and his wife generously drive Annalile down to Cape Town, a 20-hour drive from Memel, to compete in the national competition. And she didn't do too well. She marched in a parade that was televised on national TV, and she competed in a stadium that was built for the World Cup.
She was nervous.
75 or 100,000 people could have been in there. She was nervous. She didn't do too well. But while she was there, she asked Johan, could you please take me to the sea? I have heard about this thing called an ocean, but I've never seen one, and no one I know has ever seen one.
Wow.
So they take her over to the beach, and Annalile runs down to the water, and she kind of touches her toes and her fingers in the sea. And then she kind of runs around, and she goes over to a rubbish bin, and she takes out a couple bags and a plastic Coke bottle, an empty one. And they're kind of looking at her and wondering. She's kind of fiddling with stuff like maybe a young girl would do on the beach. And she's like, Annalile, come on, it's time to go. She's like, no, just wait 1 minute. And she's fiddling around. And what she does is she goes home, and instead of telling her friends and her classmates about how she did and what happened to her, and did she place or not, was she 8th or 9th or something, she goes to every desk in the classroom and she gives them a little pile of sand and a seashell in a tiny little cup of salt water so they could taste it and realize it was different from anything they'd ever had. Because she knew that realistically speaking, none of them were ever going to see it.
So many of the children don't get out of the town, or
some of them have literally not seen the next town.
And how far away is the ocean?
4 hours.
So not even that far. No. I mean, by our, that's like a road trip.
When it's a road trip, they don't make it.
Thank you.
Okay. Brian, please, boy. Johan, same headmaster we talked about before, gives us a call one day.
This?
Yep. And he says that there's a boy about to graduate from secondary school. And, Johan's the headmaster of the primary school, not the secondary school. But he says, this student, when I had him, was the best student I ever had.
Which one? Who are we talking about?
This man here.
Okay.
This is a couple of years later, and I'll tell the story that got him to that place in that engineering environment.
Okay.
So Johan says, I haven't seen him for 4 years while he was in secondary school, but he was the best student I ever had, bar none. He's about to graduate. He has no job. He has no opportunity to continue his education. There was 50 to 75% unemployment in Zamani, and I think it's tragic that this kid's going nowhere. Can you do anything? We think a little bit. There's kind of mission creep. We're already doing kind of a lot. Can we help an individual person?
Mission creep is what? Explain that.
Well,
you start doing this, and then before you know it,
you're doing 10 things.
You're trying to do everything.
And then
maybe you're not doing it all as well as you could, and it's a danger.
So we got shoe-ins. We're impacting hundreds of children's lives a year. Are we going to spend time, money, and effort to help one individual person?
Right.
We decided that we are. And we get him hooked up with a correspondence course for engineering. We hire him on to our building contractor. We haven't even talked about that, our permaculture gardens and all the natural buildings we're constructing there.
We haven't even talked about the town that you
We haven't even talked about what I do. I've been talking to you about what Cindy and our volunteers do.
So they built a town, and it's like packed, what do you call it, rammed earth buildings, and what else? Permaculture gardens. What is this?
Those are rammed earth buildings, and those are the construction workers who made it, and our volunteers who helped them along the way.
So this is folks who have helped build this town, Memel?
Yes.
And how many folks live there?
Oh, we've got about 15 people living in our community right now. We're about to build 30 more houses that Brian Bowen has designed.
This guy?
Yep. We have several other communities in the works, and we have a public-private partnership with the town that could involve housing for hundreds of elders from the Black community.
Because you were saying yesterday over coffee that elders in South Africa, Black elders, there's no elder housing at all.
No. They generally don't
Not
use
like
it.
what we have
They generally don't use it culturally because they have an extended family to return to.
But that seems good.
That's very, very good. That's better than what we do.
Right. Where we isolate.
Well, what happens if your kids died of HIV/AIDS?
Right.
What happens if you just simply were one of the few people who didn't have any kids?
And it's still an epidemic there, HIV.
It's an epidemic. Yeah.
So you've helped build this town, and it's all sustainable. Rammed earth is literally using the earth, and it's super insulating and permaculture gardens. What else about the town?
We have a farm-to-table set up where we, at least in our co-housing community, and we hope to expand it to a hospitality industry that we can cook people gourmet food that's been grown in our own gardens.
And who all lives there? What's the criteria for the people who move into these buildings?
Right now, we have people that are slightly similar to ourselves who have had like an international life, and they come for all or most of the year and live in our community. We also have some people, Black people from Soweto, from Zimbabwe, people that are key employees. Yeah. And Brian is working on a scheme that we might be able to subsidize at least half a dozen of our first 30 co-housing units so that Black people from South Africa who are working in the community can afford to live in our midst. We would appreciate that very, very much.
And do you want to talk about co-housing? What is that?
Wow. Brian, tell the people what co-housing is.
Brian. guy's been behind the scenes here.
Behind the scenes.
So this is Mr. Co-housing right here, and you've done some co-housing. I don't know why it's so delayed. You've done some co-housing in Boulder and around the country. You're involved in the co-housing. I went to one of the conferences that you're involved in running. So in this specific context, what is co-housing? How is it different than a bunch of houses together in a village?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, co-housing is an imported idea from Denmark that is in the U.S. Fairly formulaic and has a certain practice to it. There's a way of doing it. But the work we're doing in Africa is a lot of adaptation of those ideas and also recognition of the stuff that is already there that is historically part of the way people live that's been really disrupted by the apartheid system.
So you're not just bringing in some idea of great housing, you're working with their traditions and culture.
Absolutely. There's a lot of listening and a lot of responsiveness, and really what we're doing with this entire project is reacting to the situation on the ground there in this small town and township environment.
And that's a major problem traditionally with nonprofits, right? They go in with a fixed idea of how they can, and it's virtuous and wonderful, how we can help, but it's not really applicable. They're not listening. It's more patriarchal.
Great, but
it's like, we're going to do this.
An exported sort of cultural imperialism in a way, right? But this is,
and then you leave and stuff falls apart and it's not sustainable because the people aren't really engaged.
Yeah, so what we're doing there is we're building homes out of the earth that comes out of the foundations. We're using local labor. We're training people on how to do it. When I went and taught folks how to do rammed earth construction, it wasn't about me going to teach them. It was me going there to learn how to do it with them. They learned how to compose the soil mixture themselves with me, and we built the formwork together, and we built the first sections of rammed earth wall, and we all stripped it off and thought, oh my God, is this really going to work? And it was beautiful, and it was fun, wonderful to see all these folks, dudes who've been tamping earth all day with me, and getting out their cell phones and taking pictures with their buddies, and coming up to me and saying, I'm going to build my mom a house like this. This is really awesome.
So you're talking about locals or volunteers?
Local dudes who they live in Zamani, and they're part of the population that has nutrition, lack of food availability, lack of educational access, unemployment between 50 to 75%. So when you give people this set of little pieces of information and skills that allows them to build their own housing with very little money, and
how are you paying for all this? I mean, this is
the first micro community we built that I'm thinking of right now is a template for co-housing in the sort of post-township context, right? So that was largely built by charitable donations from friend and family, and it worked. It worked really, really well. And
what worked? The funding?
Actually, the funding is not working that well because we're not good fundraisers,
right?
And so that's one thing that we really need to figure out is how do we fund this and how do we get some money into the system. We've got a lot of ideas. And
so if people are watching who are inspired specifically, they can go to your website, which is in the title, right?
We are so bad at fundraising, we don't even have a donate button on the website.
Okay, that is bad.
They could send us an email off of the website and say they'd like to contribute. But maybe someone's watching who's an actual fundraiser and like to get involved in our project.
And that's the real way. Really I used to work in fundraising. Not volunteering. I used to work in fundraising.
You're hired.
I'm busy. And I had no idea what I was doing. My boss, Jeff Walsh, who you knew, was amazing. So I respect the art of fundraising immensely. And if anyone out there is actually good at it, unlike me or you.
And it is an art, the skill set. I'm a great architect, but I'm not a
good fundraiser. Have the time of your life, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and transform your life.
On that level, there's a lot of opportunity in terms of straight charitable donations, in terms of seeding microeconomic efforts, in terms of creating a community development company that would be able to roll out affordable housing and more conventional finance methods, and then develop it. So there's a lot of richness to it. The things that are working really well, though, you asked what was working, and I, of course, went straight to the thing that wasn't working, which is the fundraising part, is the proof of concept. The credibility that Steven and Cindy and this group have gained in the local area there by actually walking the talk, doing it, is intense. You've got these beautiful rammed earth buildings that we took the time to build in the township.
Rammed earth is literally taking earth talk about local building.
You build a formwork, like a plywood formwork system, sort of like you would imagine for pouring concrete, and then you tamp in lifts of dirt 6 inches at a time, and you compress it down to 2 or 3 inches
Until it becomes like concrete or something?
It's really, really super hard.
And it's good for insulation. And
yeah, in their climate,
super eco.
Yeah, it's the perfect solution in this climate. It's not the perfect solution for every climate, but this is very climate responsive design. So
what kind of climate is it bad in?
It would be bad in a climate where you spend more continuous time cold or more continuous time hot.
I see, because
it's got a good
holds the temperature.
Diurnal swing throughout the day, and you get a lot of benefit out of the mass effect of it. Plus, it's super low technology. It's a skill set that doesn't require extensive technological innovation. And then you can buy timbers for the roof at the hardware store, and you can buy zinc for the roof, which is what they make the tin shacks out of. They're ubiquitous down there. And
yeah, sorry, everything's mirrored, and I can't. My mind can't handle it.
But these little passive solar rammed earth homes, when you set them in a co-housing context where people can share.
So this is what you're kind of replacing.
We're replacing those with something that's like 2 or 3 times as big. It's rammed earth, never freezes, never overheats, and is healthy and clean.
Wow.
And we also have it built so that you can remove window and door sections, or window and sill sections, and expand it and contract it as families change over time.
Wow.
So it's highly adaptable. It's not sort of set in stone, which is cool. And then you wrap that in a permaculture food producing context. And rainwater harvesting and the use of gray water to keep the groundwater up.
Gray water is reusing any water you've already used that's not toxic. It's usable.
Yeah, exactly. Like shower water or washing machine kind of water, that kind of thing.
And any of us can do that if you use biodegradable soap, which is key. You can't put toxic stuff through your water.
No bleach.
No bleach. I do it at my house.
It's a great idea. And then, when you think about that photo you showed, the typical pattern there is one of those houses with a pit toilet out back.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you take the time and energy that goes into digging and creating a pit toilet, and you share that same amount of time and energy amongst 5, 7, 12 households, all of a sudden you have the time and energy it takes to build an indoor toilet that flushes and has a septic system. So the magic of sharing is actually a big part of this, which we're bringing in right now from Boulder, from Denmark, from this other sort of external idea, but is rooted very much in the historical way people lived in South Africa. So
how did you two meet?
Well, when we say this stuff to them, they say, "Oh yeah, we know about that. We know how to do that." It's really familiar. It's not like, "Why would we share this stuff?"
Sure.
So it works out really well.
So how do you connect with people like Brian?
We met at a national co-housing conference.
One of those co-housing conferences.
Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And our motivation was that we had planned out this community that was going to have these wonderful permaculture gardens and organic vegetables instead of landscaping, the edible landscape. We were going to build natural houses, and we decided that if we're going to do all this really groovy stuff, real environmentally friendly stuff, we had to have a social element. It couldn't just be a subdivision or a condominium compound.
Right.
So we went out seeking what is a social structure that people can live comfortably and harmoniously with one another.
And that's how you find co-housing.
Yep.
And that's sort of where we got to Brian is like, what is co-housing? It's creating community, not just, like you said, a subdivision.
The old-fashioned neighborhood of the future.
Well said. So I live in an old-fashioned neighborhood, but there's not that kind of community. Co-housing deliberately puts parks at the center of stuff where everyone can meet up. It's small yards to force people into those parks where they connect. Because connection, again, is joy.
Yep, and places where people can enjoy a couple meals together a week.
Oh, right. Like a common and sharing tools instead of everyone having a lawnmower in their garage, 80 lawnmowers per block or whatever. You have shared resources, shared hot tub, which isn't as gross as it sounds.
Yep.
Thinking of your guys' co-housing.
Mm-hmm.
The children can run around and kind of be shared, watched by the community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cinema
So
room
inspiring.
for watching
Like when I
Facebook
visited
Live.
your co-housing, what's that?
Cinema room for watching Facebook
There you go.
Live.
Exactly.
I want to not forget to finish the story of Boy becoming an engineer, But I want to also speak a little bit to what Brian was saying about the fundraising. Although we've been terrible at it, I think that we have been sophisticated enough to realize that a lot of what we could do doesn't necessarily have to be charitably donated.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of what we want to do could just be an easy to manage loan. And I think you put the Memel.Global L3C at the beginning. And I'm just going to take 30 seconds to explain technicalities of that L3C.
Okay.
What that would allow us to do is take money from like a family foundation or something like that, that they're legally obligated to pay out part of each year to keep their foundation in good standing. And instead of giving it away, they could loan it to us. And we could pay them back with 2 or 3% interest. Or we could pay them back with 5% interest, whatever they required. And so we could get our communities built, and they could have their money returned to them so that they could give it away to someone else or loan it to someone else again in the future.
And what's the direct benefit of them giving or lending money to you all? What happens?
They are legally obligated to get rid of at least 5% of their money each year. So if you put $100 million in a family foundation,
like what? How does it change the lives of folks?
Oh my God, we change the lives of the people who are living in our houses. We more change the lives of the people who are constructing the houses. We teach people how to grow vegetables again, which they forgot because the apartheid government herded them on to little marginal pieces of land, kind of like America, Indian reservations.
Right.
We're building food security. We're helping the girls in the school.
There's domestic violence. There's all kinds of issues, right?
There's terrible issues. Yeah. Lovely people.
Trauma.
Terrible trauma.
All kinds.
Yes. Yeah.
So you can help provide a healing situation where they can learn, like the cliche about fishing, they can learn to fish themselves, not just be given a fish.
And the biggest difference between that and other opportunities around the world is that people can very comfortably come here and visit. They could bring their children.
There was a question on Facebook Live. So from Thomas, how do people visit, including myself?
Okay, great. Send us a message on our website.
Okay.
We have different ways. You can pay some money and stay in these guest houses that Brian designed.
Cool.
Luxury guest houses, and live amongst our community.
Okay.
You can volunteer for a short term. You can volunteer for a long term. There's a lot of different ways they could do it, and we'd be plenty happy to hear from people who are interested.
Wow. And can groups go, like a family or a business or whatever?
No question. We could have 20 or 30 people.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to get back to Boy. We decided we're going to send him to this engineering course.
Right.
At the end of the course, turns out he has to do an internship, a practicum, in order to be certified as an engineer. And he has to go to a different city to take up this opportunity. And we have visitors at the time, just like you're saying. Maybe you'll be a visitor sometime. So we're sitting at the dining room in our common house, and he's telling us about this opportunity he has. And one of our visitors says, if you got to go to another city, I'll spring for your housing, for 3 or 4 months.
Wow.
I'll take on the cost of that. So Boy was able to go do his internship, and then he became a certified engineer, the first engineer in his community. And he got a job with the electrical generating company in South Africa, bought a house, got married. We were invited to his wedding. We were the guests of honor. And his life is wonderful now. And he was this close to just being a member of the unemployed in Zamani.
So it's really allowing people to realize their potential and enjoy a good, simple, wonderful
So we've got all potential.
life.
We've got an engineer. We've got provincial long jumping champions. We've got people that are getting an education. We've got people that are able to manage crews of workers, like Bright America, who's our building contractor.
Mm-hmm.
He came to us as a carpenter.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes when you're good at something and you give people extra responsibility, it doesn't work out. Sometimes it does. Bright has risen to the occasion, and now he can manage 10 or 20 people. And he actually came to America.
Mm.
We brought him here to learn a little bit about woodworking because it's all masonry in South Africa. We wanted fine touches, to finish off our houses. Mm. And Brian hosted him here at Wild Sage. People in Boulder know Bright America.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Okay.
Well, is there anything else you want to touch on?
Maybe come back for another hour or two, but I think
This has been wonderful.
We've
Still got a good
out.
crowd here, and we're an hour and 10 minutes in.
You got 10 or 15 more minutes? You let me tell one more story?
One more. Let's do it.
I want to talk about a woman named Selena and her daughter named Maxine.
And folks, if you want to stick around, please do. And we're going to tell one more story. And if you don't, I totally understand. And please share this up and get involved. If so inspired, and check out the link in the website. There's a bunch of likes. Thank you, folks, for listening in. So who are we talking about here?
This is Maxine. She's the daughter of Selena. And right there, she's doing a babysitting job for Brian Bowen's son, Jesse.
Is that your son?
Yeah.
Aw. All right, here we go. So we're talking about, everything's backward, I can't do it. This lady.
That's right. So her mom was a custodian at the municipal buildings. And miraculously, she became friends with my wife, Cindy. It's really hard, no matter how much you respect people, it's really hard to become a true friend if one of them's got a graduate degree in the law from America and one of them's a janitor in the Black Township.
Because there's such a divide.
There's just not that much to talk about and stuff.
Right.
So somehow or other, they become genuine friends. And Selena was highly motivated, and Cindy gave her tasks and said, we'll pay you 1,000 rands if your team can collect thatch grass for us so that we can make roofs or something like that. And Selena would hire half a dozen women. We loved that it was women.
Well, that's a big deal, right?
Big deal. And they'd work really hard on the weekend, and they'd split the money, and they always ended up with more money than any of the men made per day during the week.
This is a huge deal for independence and women's rights on a very day-to-day level, not a...
We could talk about this for an entire interview.
Yeah.
This touched our hearts. We even considered trying to build an entire house that was only made by women. Tragically, Selena's husband, to find a job, had to go to a neighboring town. He was a night watchman. He hooked up with another woman. He came home, infected his wife with AIDS.
Oh, wow.
She had an infant daughter who was infected with AIDS, and the mom died shortly after childbirth. Cindy's friend.
So the mom of this.
The mom of Maxine. So we come to Maxine and we say, you worked on your mom's crew, and we know you're a hard worker. And parenthetically, Maxine had already dropped out of secondary school. She was a mom herself. She had a child when she was 15 years old.
Okay.
And we told Maxine, because of your mom, we're going to take care of you if we can.
I can't do this.
Sorry about that, Waylon.
No, it's great.
And so we said, what do you want? You want to work in our gardens? Would you like us to train you somehow and get some inside job? We just want to make sure you get steady employment and you get through. And she surprised the hell out of us. She said, ma'am, she said, if you don't mind, if you could just give me a little bit of money instead of a salary, if you could just give me a little bit of money, I want to see if I can finish school. So Maxine, the 15-year-old mom, goes back and finishes secondary school.
Wow.
And 2 years later...
Does she have a partner, active?
No.
So on her own, single mom at 15 wants to finish school. We didn't think she'd be able to do it. We drive into our compound, coming back from a few months in America one time, and she's there meeting us at the gate. We throw open the gate, drive into our beautiful orchard and garden, and Maxine is beaming like you have never seen anyone. She says, I graduated from secondary school. And we're like, we want to throw our arms around her and hug her and congratulate her. She says, but wait. She goes, I got into college. Wow.
And we're like, oh my God. And they gave her a scholarship, and we continued to give her this little tiny allowance so that she could go and do this. She went to the University of the Free State. She studied engineering.
Wow.
Every time she came back to Memel on holiday, we, instead of putting her in the gardens, we hired her onto our construction crew so she would know about buildings and how they were constructed. And now Maxine is the second engineer in the history of her town.
Wow. And again, big deal for a woman just to get any kind of education or independent work.
Yeah.
Wow.
Only college graduate woman
Well, that was worth it.
From our community.
Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Waylon.
It's always fun to see these conversations unfold. And Brian, thank you for your friendship, long-time friendship and service.
Absolutely.
Good man. So if folks want to get involved, again, you can help. It sounds silly, but likes or emoticons or loves or hearts or whatever help Facebook understand that this is video to share beyond the choir. It kind of opens up the algorithm. So that's one little way to help. And then comments also are helpful. But the main thing, obviously, go to Memel.Global.
Yes, www.Memel.Global.
Okay. .global is like .com.
Yes, it is.
Okay. So Memel.Global, and check out the site if you want a, what do they call it, like volunteerism?
Yeah, volunteerism.
Meaningful vacation that could be very hard work if you want it to.
If you want to do purposeful work and have a really good time in a pleasant setting, come to Africa, come to Memel in Africa.
Yeah, so if you ever go on tourism and you feel like you're just seeing what tourists see and not actually connecting with the culture in a meaningful way, I think we've all had that experience. This can be the opposite. And thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. What else? Is there any other plugs we should make? Stephen, thank you so much. And love to Cindy. I can't wait to meet her.
You shall.
All right. Thanks, folks.